Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we've got a really interesting guest. We've got Jim Basar on. And Jim, you're head of enterprise sales for Intwine. And I want to get in and talk a lot more about that. But your role puts you right in the heart of some of the biggest restaurant chains, QSR industry chains in the industry in the world, really, and how you're working with them. How you're working with them in terms of their evolution in their business, how the kitchen has really turned into a very digital, connected environment, what that means for their business, what that means in terms of also vulnerability when you start to rely on your network and that connection for virtually everything that you do. There's a lot of change going on in the industry right now. And, what I'd love to do though, first is I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. I learned very quickly that you actually have a bachelor's and master's in physics. And now you're like the guru salesperson. That's a major transformation.
Yeah, it was quite a journey. It's been quite a journey. And first off, I appreciate you having me, Steve. I'm really excited for the conversation. But yeah, I come from, maybe humble beginnings. Actually started here at Intwine as an intern during grad school. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in physics, but my physics master's program was a little bit interesting. It was actually a physics entrepreneurship program. So it was all about taking high technology and bringing it to the market. And our second year of our program at Case Western Reserve University here in Cleveland was all about joining a high-tech startup and writing your thesis on their technology. So I actually started with Intwine as an intern. I was one of the first, if not the first employee back about 15 years ago now. And I was writing my thesis on some air quality monitoring IoT sensors that we were developing in coordination with University Hospitals Medical Center, Case Western. And really the idea there was that we were using commercial off-the-shelf air quality sensors and writing algorithms to connect those sensors and use the crosstalk between the sensors to drive to medically relevant data and findings. So we were trying to take something that was, a gold standard instrument was $6,000, say. We were trying to take it down to a couple of hundred so that we could put these sensor arrays in the homes of COPD patients, asthma patients, and monitor their air quality to avoid exacerbations and hospital visits. And that's really what got me in here at Intwine. And over the years, as the company's evolved, I've had roles in engineering into product management, developing our first IoT gateway, which added cellular connectivity. And then from there, I think that was kind of just, we had a product that was designed and we needed somebody that knew the technology and also had the ability to talk to people, because that's kind of rare in engineering sales side, and move my way to, our vice president of sales here.
If you wouldn't mind, because you serve the restaurant industry now, just give us kind of your point of view of the trend, the connected kitchen, the digitalized kitchen, and what that means for the industry, just to start out with.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is there's really, almost I've heard it called a gold rush of technology that's going into the restaurant space right now. And this is front of house, back of house, everywhere within the house. And that's really was driven by the kind of the advancement and the move towards cloud-based point of sale systems. So that's kind of what drove really that need for reliable and always on internet connection. And then as these restaurants are starting to add more technology into their stores with digital menu boards and guest Wi-Fi and TVs, and then getting into connected kitchen with temperature sensors, and they're bringing more equipment online, that internet connection is really kind of the backbone of a business. And I work with one large franchise group that we always talk about. They make pizzas. And one of the franchisees at one of their conferences kind of quipped with us and said, I used to not be able to process a credit card if my internet was out. Now I can't even make a pizza. That's how critical the infrastructure is. So it's definitely moving fast, and we're really excited about it.
Tell me a little bit about the business of the QSR industry, because we know the industry operates on shoestring in terms of margins, right? And so every bit of margin you can get out of your operations is something that's going to sustain the business, right? And like from a business perspective, What is the connected kitchen? What does the digitalization of these restaurants mean for their business, like from a dollars and cents standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, it can really mean everything because it's about having that availability when a customer in your restaurant, you need to be able to serve them because not only, is that a revenue transaction for you, but that's an impression with that customer that's in your facility that if something goes wrong, if you can't take their credit card, you had to move to cash only, whatever it might be, if you have a negative impression with that customer, they might never be coming back. So maybe you're not making the $10, $15 pizza or burger sale, but it's a lot more than that. There's a lot longer of tail on a customer interactions now. And even not to get into social media, but as people are ever more online, just negative impressions travel so much faster than positive ones do that it's really, really important that your operations are moving quickly and they're humming when your customers are in the facility. But also with labor shortages and the issues that restaurants are having with finding good help, that's also something that they're using to, increase their operational efficiency so that there's less menial tasks for their employees so that they can do the things that are important. That really what I see restaurant chains moving to is we want humans doing things that only humans can do. If it's something that technology can do, let's try and figure out how to do it with technology versus having a human doing something that a temperature sensor could read temperature a lot better than, myself walking up to the fridge every once in a while and checking the temperature.
There's also in a lot of QSR restaurants, there's a growing percentage of their business that doesn't come in and sit down, that just comes in and picks up, right? Or a service that comes in and picks up. And so the interaction through the app, the anticipated wait times, the promises and the expectations that are being created for that entire customer base, it's all based on that connected kitchen. And so more and more, you and I talked about this before we got on, more and more there's things that are on sensors, right? Like temperature gauges and different things that can't necessarily always be wired and plugged in and need to be like the Internet of Things and sensors that are happening there. You talked up front about, your product and the technology and the Internet of Things. Tell us in the restaurant industry why that's more important than ever today.
I think it's really harkens back to the labor shortages and the thin margins. I'm not an economist, but as you get into inflation and kind of price pressure from customers to not want to pay more, but your cost of goods is going up. Things like a temperature sensor, they seem so simple that we're just going to monitor temperature. And I overlook it a lot with my background and some of the really cool IoT technologies that we're into. Things like a temperature sensor can be invaluable for restaurants. We also work with a lot of schools in their cafeterias, putting temperature sensors into their refrigerators and freezers, because if you have an unmanned hour and your freezer or your cooler goes out and you lose that product, again, it goes back to you're not just losing that inventory, the thousands of dollars that's in there, that comes straight out of your bottom line, but also you're impacting those customers that want to come to your restaurant. And maybe you're out of a certain item or, you're putting them at risk even if you didn't know there was an outage and something went to a spoilage temperature, the refrigerator came back online before you got there. It's not necessarily that your fault, you didn't know, you're not trying to serve bad food, but you could be. And if someone comes to your restaurant and gets sick, they're not coming back. So it's really important for restaurants to start looking at technology to solve some of these challenges.
So the trend these days is on a wireless infrastructure inside of the restaurants, and the Internet of Things and the sensors is one of them. But you work with some of the biggest restaurant chains in the world, and you're not always in the heart of an urban area, right? You could be on the outskirts. You could be, in an area where connectivity is a challenge. How are you helping your customers deal with that challenge?
Yeah, that's the first thing we talk about with restaurants is always the internet. That is the backbone of stores these days. You still have your bar at the corner that might be cash only, but 99% of restaurants, the internet is the backbone of all of the systems, of all of the revenue coming in and everything that goes out of the restaurant. With, I think you kind of alluded it with DoorDash and Uber Eats and the online delivery systems as well. Those orders have to come in. And specifically in the franchise space, as a franchise organization looks to go more towards the cloud and a connected point of sale, or most of them already have, but they're continuing to improve and, keep throwing a lot of buzzwords out here, but AI as well. You want more data out of your store so you can manipulate it and figure out what's going on and how you become more efficient. That's just causing these stores to pump out an incredible amount of data. One of the franchise networks, another pizza chain that we work with, they went from using about 30 gigabytes of data a month, so about a gigabyte a day for their point of sale. They put a new point of sale out, a new system that's more cloud-based, more bells and whistles on the back end for the franchise owner. They're using over 1.2 terabytes now. So you're talking about orders of magnitude that the data is changing. And that's for everyone. That's not just for the franchises that are in the dense metropolitan areas. When you're talking about a franchise network, you've got thousands of locations in every rural city in America as well. So when you don't have an option, you have dial-up internet for, the lifetime of your business, you got to find something else. And that's where we started. We were very early in implementing 5G as a primary internet in partnerships with the cellular carriers. Now we work with Starlink as well on satellite solutions and, on the SD-WAN side, just being able to bond multiple carrier solutions together to create the experience that you need. Another one is a taco place that we work with, a large franchise, has an AI drive-through. It uses tremendous amount of data to power that drive-through, and they have a requirement, 100 megabit per second. Doesn't sound like too much, but when you have tens of thousands of restaurants across the country, it's not available everywhere. So what we end up doing is coming up with creative solutions to bond multiple cellular carriers together. Maybe we're using a Verizon and a T-Mobile, or two Verizons, or a Verizon and a Starlink, or terrestrial and a Starlink. We have to be creative to help these companies get to the level of internet that they need at their stores and the level of reliability.
So if I were one of those stores or franchise owners or at the corporate office, what would you say to guarantee that kind of availability? Is it achievable? Is that something that I would be able to rely on these days?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, with every connectivity option, whether it's terrestrial, wired broadband, it's satellite, it's 5G or 4G wireless with the carriers, there are going to be issues. Everyone has internet at their home. Doesn't happen often. It goes out once in a while. You don't really notice it at home because maybe you stop streaming for a few minutes or your phone kicked over to cellular. It's not as big of a deal as it is in the franchise or the restaurant space. But what I'd say to get that reliability, what you really need is a true partner that comes in with you. And when one of those issues inevitably arises, when you're talking about thousands of restaurants again, you're going to have issues from time to time across the country. You need someone that you can call that knows your business. And that's really where Incline comes in our partnerships with all these carriers and, broadband and wireless providers, is we come in as that one throat to choke, or, single point of contact is probably a nicer way to say it, where you're able to call into Intwine and you're going to get a US based support person that's going to answer, not AI, that's going to answer the phone, identify your location, and they're also going to have the context. I've been trying to popularize the term context aware support. It's really important to have that context of what's happening at the location that we've deployed our technology. It doesn't help for us to just say, oh, you have a Verizon cellular modem. It looks good, call somebody else. That's not what we do. You need a partner that can be that glue between your corporate infrastructure, your franchisees, the general managers, the hardware, which we provide, and then those network carriers that are providing the data transport.
So are you talking about very much like a dashboard that you can literally bring up their network and troubleshoot remotely, understand, solve, explain a little bit more about what that support that you're talking about is?
Yeah. So our team is equipped with that dashboard style solution. We also have the ability to equip franchise organizations and franchisees with that same dashboard. Now, do all of them take us up on it? Probably, not really. If you're a smaller franchise that only has a couple locations, you don't have a dedicated IT person. We just operate as that IT person, right? So if you call into us, we're going to help you troubleshoot. We're going to figure out what's going on with the issue. But the thing that we do here at Intwine is we really make an effort to learn all of our customers, especially the franchise organizations, what's their technology infrastructure? Do they have Meraki firewalls and switches and access points? Who's their cloud point of sale provider? Is there a support number with that? We even have Slack implementations with the direct support teams at a lot of our large franchise customers. So if a customer calls into Intwine, we don't see it as an internet issue. We don't see it as a hardware issue. We can go and kind of fast track a support ticket because our customers trust us that we're doing that first level of troubleshooting, and they give us kind of that priority access to their teams because they know really what we're looking out for is the good of that franchisee. And that's really all we want to do is create really good experiences around internet and connectivity, because as you talk to people, there's not many people that'll tell you, I love my internet provider. They say, I really, really dislike them, but we try to kind of be that bridge because we want everyone to have a good experience and to have that reliable solution, because although the internet is probably one of the most important things in your restaurant, it's not what you want to be working on. That's not where your passion is if you're a franchisor. So let us handle that part of it.
So if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit, get technical enough, but your technology, right? And you talk about like being like nobody's like in love with their internet provider. The world you're really talking about is there's multiple internet providers that you've bonded, you've brought together, and there's technology that you have that is unique and proprietary that you guys deploy. And I just love to kind of get a little bit more in terms of the technical side of what you do and how you provide that service.
Yeah. So that's a complicated answer because there's a big web of technology that's integrated based on the needs of the customer. In a location, we do have our own technology. So we have our own 4G, 5G routers. We also partner with companies that make 4G and 5G routers, and partners like Bigleaf that have an SD-WAN solution that enable us to bond connections together and get really deep into the networking side of things. We also typically create good enough relationships with our hardware and technology partners that we can even influence the product roadmap. So as an expert, especially in the franchise and restaurant space, we can come to our partners, and we very selectively choose our partners based on having that access and that relationship where we're respected as a partner and can help kind of co-develop and create solutions. Our expertise and our technology really comes in our engineering team. We do have a team of software engineers, hardware engineers, and then really AI and analytics engineers is where a lot of our expertise lies. And what that is really us creating our own, proprietary way to manage connections that are out in the field. So as we have a fleet of thousands of routers, tens of thousands of routers out the field, how do we proactively notify customers or proactively maintain our customers' networks, ideally, so that there aren't issues that arise because we've already identified it as it's starting to happen. We're tracking that cellular signal strength or the Starlink latency or the broadband side of things. We track statistics there that go into our proprietary system where we can, worst case, reach out to a customer and say, hey, we noticed you had an issue this morning with your internet. We want to help you reboot your router or resync your SIM or whatever it might be. But ideally, we just notice it and are able to act on it in the background before they even recognize an issue. So that's really where our technology comes in, is some of that software and process. That's where our differentiation is here at Intwine.
So you talked about AI, and every podcast wants to talk about AI in some way, but what you're talking about there is almost like leading indicators before the problem is a problem, right? Like that's the perfect world, right? Is like you avoid the downtime, you avoid the issues because you're seeing things that are the leading indicators for that. So is that like a good takeaway from what you're saying in the AI work that you're doing is and being proactive? It almost feels like agentic AI kind of an application.
Yeah, so it's really condition-based monitoring. It's been out for a long time in the industrial space, and that's a whole separate division of Intwine that kind of works in that world of, monitoring vibration and temperature and create these algorithms that can predict when machinery is going to go down. we took a lot of those same concepts and values and apply it to the network and allow ourselves to get out ahead and get in advance of what the network is doing and how it's responding to be able to preemptively get to those systems and, preempt issues that might arise. Really, in the most basic sense, we're still in the IoT space, especially in the restaurant industry, where we have franchise restaurants and chains that utilize our temperature monitoring system. So that's probably an easy way to illustrate it is we have temperature monitors in all of the coolers and freezers, whether they're reach-in coolers or top line, make lines, or the walk-in coolers and freezers. They're all battery powered. They all wirelessly communicate to our router that is the primary backup internet connection for the location. And what we did in the past was it's just if a temperature goes over a threshold for X number of minutes. So if it's a refrigerator, if it goes over 45 degrees for 30 minutes, send me a notification. The most simple sense. And that's what a lot of people do in the cellular space too. If my system goes offline, send me a notification. That's already too late. And what we were doing in the temperature space is we started to develop our algorithms and our solution to learn that cooler or freezer specifically and tune out a lot of false positive notifications, because I think everyone in the IT world has had a system. You turn on notifications, you get 4,000 emails, you turn it off and you say, hold on, we got to think about something here. And what we found in the temperature space was we were able to eliminate over 90% of the false positive notifications while continuing to deliver 100% of the positive notifications. So we tuned out 90% of the noise. And that was the first step, was like, let's just tune out the noise and make sure notifications that are going out are real. And then once we did that, we were able to move into, okay, now I'm sending good notifications people care about and they can act on. So now how can I not send a notification that your system is down? How can I send you a notification that your system is going to go down and that you can go get your HVAC tech or your, refrigeration specialist in there, or, sometimes it's as easy as just go shut the door because you're in a scenario. So taking those principles that we built our way through in the temperature space, and it doesn't only apply to coolers and freezers either, which is, another thing that kind of was a realization of ours is temperature is infinitely useful in a restaurant. Just think about just putting it next to the oven in a pizza shop. Your owner now can know exactly when that oven turned on. So were my employees on time? Did they turn on the oven on time? And when they leave the restaurant, if that temperature doesn't start coming down, they didn't turn it off. And now you're burning energy in your store and you're cooling it when you don't need to. And you're, burning the natural gas or whatever it is that's powering it. It's been very cool to find simple technologies, adapt them to use cases, and then use that knowledge to bring it to more complex things like the network, where we can pull that information and then apply some of those same principles of, network quality versus time, and then start to make meaningful insights based on what we're collecting.
I got to tell you, we've covered so much territory here, and the human brain, we can only retain about 2 or 3 things at a time. If for all the technology professionals and all the restaurants that are listening in to this conversation, if there was one thing that was super important, but like the most important takeaway that you'd want to have them take away from our conversation here today, what would that be?
Oh man, that's a hard question because there's just so many. They're all floating around in my head, right? There's a lot of different things that we've helped restaurants with that I think are very important. And, I mentioned that I have a physics background and, I'm the VP of sales. That's kind of the blood of the entire company. We have a lot of engineers here and we're not very good at marketing. So we have a lot of very good stories that, we're working to get out into the market and talk about what we're doing. But I think the most important thing is just to be open to and not feel locked into your internet provider, because that's really, like I said, that's a backbone of everything that we do. All of our other solutions build off of the internet, both here from a technology provider position and also in the restaurant. That is the backbone of the restaurant now, is really the internet connection. I just encourage people all the time to look at their bills, look at what they're paying, look at what the quality is, and just listen and be open to all these new technologies that are coming out because people are implementing them. And just one more story as we wrap it up here is the biggest hurdle that we would have in the past in when 5G first came out, or, as satellite was starting to gain popularity, was everyone, especially in the restaurant industry, for some reason, they just looked at it as a backup. It's wireless. It's backup. I don't trust it. I'm not going to go forward with it. But with what we've done here at Intwine and with a lot of our partners is we've created the resiliency in that network by utilizing multiple technologies at a cost-effective rate. So it's not that you have to, bet your entire business on one, SIM card that's connecting to 5G. There's plenty of options out there where we could still give you the resiliency and that 5 nines of reliability with an all wireless solution. Or it could be bonded. It could be wired and wireless if you really feel that you need to have, multiple types of internet. That's really where I think a lot of people need to look at what they're doing and really think about, where they can, number one, improve their operations, but number two, a lot of times save some money as well.
It sounds like we all need to be moving into a wireless first world. I mean, just the sensors, the internet technology, Internet of Things technology, you can't wire everything. You have to rely on that. You can't always have that last mile wired connectivity. It's not always available, right? And what's just quickly, your opinion on, like, in the next 3 or 4 years, the amount of satellite providers that are going to be coming online in addition to Starlink is staggering. And the innovations and challenges and the competition is going to happen in the satellite space, right? Like the LEO space. Is that just exciting to you as somebody that brings all this together and wraps a bow around it for us?
It's really exciting. And I think the reason is that, competition is just going to drive technology advancements. First of all, people are going to be investing into it, and you have to be able to prove why you're better than someone else. So you're going to see kind of focuses, and you even see it with the cellular carriers now that, as they all have 5G now, they all have fixed wireless access where they could provide primary internet. But I'm really interested to see the moves that each of them are making as far as where are they differentiating, because you can't have a service that's just completely commoditized and just keep dropping price forever. You have to create some differentiated value. And that's where I think all the operators out in the world are going to benefit, because there's going to be such advancement in this space. And with all the competitors, there's also going to be significant cost reduction on top of that. So if you're paying for a commodity service, it's going to be cheap. If you're paying for, an elevated service that is, really cool and high end and highly engineered specific for your service, it's going to be valuable enough that it's worth paying for. So I just think that's really cool when the technology starts to meet the market in that way. And I think we're right at the cusp of it. I think this year there's going to be a lot of change and a lot of move towards 5G commoditization. And then beyond that, focus on specific niche areas where the carriers can make differentiated impact.
I wish we had another hour because this is phenomenal. But the whole mission of this podcast is to bring new and innovative solutions and ideas and the trends and the technology changes that are just hardening our networks, and the role and the importance of wireless is a part of that. And if we can all do that from our own perspectives and experiences and insights, then it's like the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were an amazing part of that rising tide today. I just wanted to say thanks for coming on and sharing with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Steve. I mean, the way you carried that conversation, it's like, you probably have a physics degree in your back pocket too.
Thank you very much.